Have you ever felt the need to hide how you really felt from your family/friends? Um, yeah, I would say most of my life, especially from family, because this is so funny. I was just talking to my roommate about this before I left the house, that like within the Hispanic community, even if you're like, well, like from personal experience, even if you're from Mexico, like even other Mexicans will judge you based on superficial things such as like the way that you speak Spanish, or the even like certain words that you use. If they're not the same slang that they use, it's like something that you get made fun of for your whole life. So I definitely, my entire life, have hidden a lot of myself, because my parents grew up with very traditional Hispanic parents, and they try to use the same thing on me, or same way of raising on me. But the problem is I grew up in like with very different friends in a very different neighborhood and surrounded like by very different people. And so a lot of the stuff that I did was either weird or whitewashed to them. I guess that's basically it. I just like, I wish there was more of a open door amongst Hispanic, like friends and family, to be more like open and maybe like a little different, because we all grew up kind of like making fun of each other as a way to like show that we love each other. But you know, I feel like that gets lost in translation sometimes, and people just don't feel open to being themselves.
Is receiving mental health services looked down upon in your family/community? I'm Latina. I specifically identify with Mexican American. So I would say generally in the Mexican American community it is looked down upon. I would say specifically because a lot of the community is Catholic, and I just feel like religion plays a big role in like whether or not your mental health is taken seriously. I know my dad's fiance, she's Mexican American, and she doesn't really talk about mental health. She kind of just talks about how like God will guide her and how all she needs is God, and she doesn't need like medication or therapy. But in my specific case, I've had a pretty good experience with my mental health in regards to like my family, because my mom struggles with mental health, and I think she understands that it's it's important to address, and it's not just something that can be written off, or I can't just like go seek out God and my problems will be fixed. So I would say generally yes, it is looked down upon, just because a lot of like, I feel like in my experience, like a lot of my family has struggled and have gone through so much hardship, and so like when I talk about mental health, and they kind of just like laugh about it. So yeah, I would say it's looked down a bit, just because like just historically like Mexican Americans have struggled a lot like with like oppression, discrimination, like systemic issues. So when I talk about my mental health, it's like they don't think that's really a priority.
I am Mexican American. I'm the son of two immigrant parents from Mexico. That makes me a second generation Mexican American. Have you ever felt afraid of asking for help when it comes to mental health? I would say yes. There's a giant stigma, especially among like immigrant like parents with mental health, where they don't believe mental health is a thing. They just think you're not trying hard enough. Like there's a phrase like just where they say "echala ganas," which means just put more effort into it. So it's kind of like scary to be able to come out to my parents and say like, personally I have anxiety or I was depressed, because they don't get it, and they just like see it as a reflection on me, not as like my environment or the stuff I'm going through. Like I remember one time specifically, I think I was like 16. I was going through a massive like depressive episode, and I couldn't really tell my parents, because when I did come out to them about like how I was like feeling like down and depressed, they were like, well, make sure this doesn't get in the way of like school, or maybe you got to stop like playing video games and like just put more effort into like yourself because that'll fix it. And they didn't really offer empathy, or they would like give me like say, well, I know you're sad, but there's people in Africa who are starving, or people in Mexico who have it worse than you, so they ain't really helpful. So yeah, I'd say overall like it's scary because there's not a lot of people feel in the community, even some people who are my generation feel this way because they were taught this way. So I'd say it's definitely scary because it's just ingrained in our society and our culture to just keep it to yourself and just gut it out.
Do you think your family knows what healthy coping strategies are? I identify as Hispanic, as Mexican American specifically. Based on what I can remember, I don't think my family knows what healthy coping strategies are. When I think of coping strategies in my family, I think of like drug use, drinking, nothing that I would consider to be a healthy coping strategy. And I also just think a lot of my family doesn't understand maybe the importance of it, because I know I experienced a lot of like my family not really understanding mental illness. Like when I first started experiencing depression as a teenager, I remember my dad like asking what I even had to be depressed about, and people in my family like not believing that anxiety exists, and it's hard to have healthy coping strategies if you don't believe that the issues exist in the first place. So I would say they don't follow healthy strategies to cope with stressors because I don't think they know any.
The question I got was, were there affordable health resources growing up in your community? I identify as a cisgender, queer, Latino man. So I grew up in an inner city portion of Chicago, and the community around was predominantly Latinx and Black as well. And honestly, when it comes down to affordable health resources, it was either a hit or miss. We had a bunch of like free clinics around the area, of course, and thank God that like sometimes my elementary school or like middle school would have like health programs around that would like teach obviously us who didn't have the best resources around, but would teach us like stuff like just like how to check for pulse, or even if you had asthma or something, like a class on how to deal with it as well. But when it comes to like it just being around, we kind of didn't. I know when it comes to like even just like mental health stuff, I'm 22 right now, and I didn't know how to find an actual like mental health specialist until I was like 20. So to give a great answer to this is just that around where I grew up, and just being Latinx in general, like having those resources around are kind of hard to find, especially if you're first gen dealing with family who just came from a new country with no actual resources at all to help out. It's kind of harder for that. But I guess that's my answer for this question.